to some uninvited house guests.
A Southside investor found strangers in his home that he was fixing up to rent out. He asked them to leave, but that didn't go well. The people living there also had some choice words for CBS 2's Lauren Victory.
I'm sorry, ma'am. Who are you paying rent to?
Get away from my door!
You won't believe what's happening in Chicago. Homes are being invaded and overtaken by migrant squatters, sparking one of the biggest law enforcement responses the city has ever seen, initiated by Mayor Brandon Johnson and executed by the Chicago PD. Recently, there's been a surge in horrifying crimes involving these squatters, but also bold home invasions and terrifying burglaries, even some affiliated with mad gangs.
It can be a fairly big problem. Squatters and some area realtors say the problem is only getting worse.
The city is now taking drastic measures to address the situation, with brutal evictions, locking up hundreds of migrants. However, not everything is set in stone, because there's one factor that could still disrupt this new policy, and his name is Joe Biden.
Joe Biden is responsible for the largest amount of illegal immigration in the history of the United States, and there are deadly consequences because of that.
Chicago is currently grappling with a crisis where numerous homes are being forcefully occupied by squatters. The situation has escalated to the point where local residents are being displaced, and neighborhoods are fuming with despair and anger.
Time and time again, we told you about homeowners fighting to get their property back after squatters moved in. Well, now it appears it's happened once again.
The chaos has directly challenged the safety of the city's residents as squatters roam the streets, taking over more properties, causing utter chaos, and committing horrifying crimes.
Pushed down and held to her head. Armed robbers target a woman in her backyard with her daughter just steps away.
This bold step raises questions about how Chicago, known for its welcoming spirit, will handle the situation and whether it will continue these forceful evictions. With more than 50,000 arrived since the spring of 2022, Chicago has seen a sharp increase in the number of homes taken over by migrants, with thousands involved in activities including taking shelter in abandoned or underutilized buildings. The impact on local communities has been severe. This crisis has cost taxpayers dearly, with city services stretched thin and safety concerns growing.
New numbers in today on how much Chicago has spent on the migrant crisis. In total, nearly $300 million has been spent since October 2022.
Mayor Brandon Johnson has stated that the city's residential zones were never designed to support such a rapid and unlawful increase in occupants. But there's an even darker side to the migrant crisis in Chicago, and it's the madness being committed in gang-related and general migrant crime, with everything from drive-bys, armed home invasions, and massive coordinated burglaries becoming the new norm. Stick around as we delve deeper into the migrant crime chaos breeding in Chicago. Migrant crime.
Each clip is chilling. In a 2.5-minute montage, Chicago police pieced together clip after clip showing a group of men armed with handguns and even a long
Chicago is currently facing a disturbing surge in crime, including burglaries, heists, and violence, which is endangering the safety of its residents.
A migrant from Venezuela is facing charges accused of attacking and women.
Picture this. Numerous migrants, recently arrived from Texas, come to Chicago with the intent to commit crimes. These individuals quickly become targets for recruitment by local gangs looking to bolster their ranks. The city is witnessing a dramatic increase in home invasions and sophisticated burglaries, with criminals using increasingly elaborate and aggressive methods.
Now to an armed robbery in Chicago and a manager held at gunpoint.
The suspect's responsible for holding up a dozen more people.
Stick around as we dive into the issue of migrant involvement in gang activities in just a moment. The rise in burglaries in Chicago is not just a series of random incidents, but a troubling pattern that is growing more complex by the day.
This morning, a smoke shop on Chicago's northwest side is burglarized overnight. The front window of the Urban City Smoke Shop on Foster Avenue was shattered.
At this pivotal moment, the city is in desperate need of effective strategies to address this escalating problem linked to migrant criminals.
Several migrants have now been involved in altercations with arms.
This complex situation is exacerbated by the influx of newcomers who are quickly learning the intricacies of criminal activities from well-established offenders in the city. Picture migrants, still new to the area, now orchestrating thefts in upscale shopping districts with guidance from seasoned criminals.
A pair of Venezuelan migrants has been charged with stealing almost $3,000 in merchandise from the Oak Brook Mall. Police arrested
arrested Luis Mendez Gomez and Frank Montes Davila.
With 47 migrants arrested in just a few weeks, Chicago is struggling to protect its citizens. The current situation resembles a crime drama, where organized crime rings meticulously train new recruits in theft, providing logistical support and evasion techniques.
3 strikes with a hammer, a tug at the front door, a few kicks and a push, and they're in.
Despite these efforts, many are caught, but they are often released back onto the streets, exposing the shortcomings of the legal system. However, the situation is further complicated by the fact that not all newcomers are involved in petty thefts. Some are engaged in more alarming criminal activities. For instance, the Cook County Sheriff's Office recently busted an operation involving the creation of fake IDs for shoplifting schemes.
Migrants looking for fast cash to get a job can wind up as pawns in a criminal operation.
Many of them caught stealing in order to pay for fake IDs to gain employment.
Moreover, some migrants have histories that include connections to gangs and international crime syndicates, which makes them a greater threat due to their involvement in major crimes ranging from to drug distribution. The issue intensified when a Venezuelan migrant, suspected of having cartel connections, was linked to a recent drive-by exacerbating the safety concerns and daily life disruptions for Chicago residents.
2 people, including a teenager, are dead and 7 others hurt.
This narrative goes beyond mere crime statistics or police reports. It affects the real lives of Chicagoans, whose sense of security and well-being is rapidly deteriorating. Reports of sudden break-ins and the fear of becoming the next victim are becoming all too common, fueling debates about the city's leadership, particularly under Mayor Brandon Johnson.
I want Mayor Brandon Johnson to understand that you're selling us out for people who can't vote.
The community, understandably outraged, is directing their anger towards both local and national figures, including Mayor Johnson and President Joe Biden, blaming them and the criminal actions of some migrants for the escalating unrest. This anger is culminating in significant anti-migrant protests, underlining the tense atmosphere in the city and the complex challenges it faces. Why are Chicagoans angry?
Nobody asked us. Nobody told us. We have more than a few thousand people who signed a signature here who said no. We said no!
Tensions are rising in Chicago, and the root of the discontent lies with local and national leadership. Many residents are expressing frustration towards Mayor Brandon Johnson and the Biden administration, accusing them of prioritizing migrants over essential city services, which they believe should be funded first.
These South and West Side homeowners are angry. They believe the city has overextended itself and should be putting the tens of millions of dollars earmarked for migrants into Chicago's most vulnerable neighborhoods.
But the South Side has been under-resourced, underfunded for years, for decades. We have schools that need to be reopened.
Safety concerns are at the forefront for many in the community. A growing number of Chicagoans feel increasingly at risk in their own neighborhoods, attributing this unease to the influx of migrants, especially those men identified as having criminal records. These individuals are perceived as significant threats to the safety and security of local residents.
Brighton Park neighbors have been protesting this possible migrant tent camp location for hours now, even launching fireworks at one point. Residents we spoke with say they feel betrayed by city leadership and are concerned for their safety.
Financial concerns are also stirring controversy. Residents are upset about the allocation of their tax dollars, which they see as being diverted away from local needs. This has led to broader questions about the priorities and decisions of city leaders.
Move over, kids. Migrants are taking over your neighborhood football field in Chicago in favor of a new shelter for illegal immigrants, and residents are outraged.
The use of schools for temporary migrant housing has sparked considerable anger as well. Many argue that schools should focus solely on educating children rather than serving as makeshift shelters.
When do citizens of the United States of America come first?
The unrest is not confined to the city center, but has spread to suburban areas, where the presence of migrants has elicited strong "not in my backyard" reactions.
How about this? Give them all these politicians' addresses and put them in their backyards, in their basements, in their houses.
This situation raises pointed questions about whether politicians would tolerate similar conditions in their own neighborhoods.
Things got pretty heated during a protest in Brighton Park this morning. In the last 2 hours, residents showed up with drums, cymbals, and signs, upset over construction for a possible tent location for migrants.
As hundreds of buses continue to transport migrants into Chicago, residents are left wondering why this is happening and what it means for the future of their city.
That's the simple solution, is no, turn the buses around.
Stay tuned as we delve deeper into this complex issue. Influx of migrants.
State leaders say they've been told to expect up to 25 buses of migrants each day.
Picture this, hundreds of buses, each filled to capacity, arriving in Chicago. This isn't a scene from a movie, it's the current reality.
All right, we're turning now to Chicago's migrant crisis. A record number of buses, 36 of them filled with asylum seekers, has arrived in the city since Saturday.
The city is experiencing a significant influx of migrants, attracting national attention.
7 buses of migrants will arrive in Chicago today. This follows the at least 7 coach buses full of migrants that arrived in Chicago yesterday. In fact, just a few minutes ago, another coach bus full of migrants pulled up right beside us.
Who are these arrivals? Predominantly men, a detail that raises concerns. Notably, many are identified with criminal backgrounds, adding complexity to the situation and fueling public debate.
9 more buses carrying people arrived in Chicago today. That is the most in one day ever.
Why is Chicago a magnet for these migrants? Its status as a sanctuary city makes it an appealing destination, offering protection and support. Yet, this policy is now under intense scrutiny as the influx strains local resources, community safety, and overall well-being.
A breaking news update, more migrants are arriving in Chicago right now.
Our news crew came across a bus as they were reporting on the migrant crisis at the Chicago Office of Emergency Management.
The decision by Texas Governor Abbott to send these buses is portrayed as a reaction to federal immigration policies. Politics aside, the real challenges are palpable. Chicago is grappling with an extraordinary situation that is testing its infrastructure, patience, and resilience.
The state of Texas continues to send migrants to the Midwest, with Chicago as their final destination. Before it was buses, now it's by plane.
Residents are feeling the effects, with some contemplating relocation due to the increasing pressures on housing, public services, and safety. This is a pivotal moment for Chicago as it navigates the consequences of its sanctuary city status in the midst of intense migration debates.
Migrant buses coming from Texas are now stopping in the suburbs. There's a crackdown, as you know, a new one here in Chicago.
As more buses continue to arrive, Chicago stands at a crossroads. How will it respond? What will be the implications for the future of a city celebrated for its diversity and resilience? Stay with us as we continue to cover the evolving migrant surge reshaping Chicago. Housing challenges.
With more than 15,000 new arrivals in the past year, city leaders say the #1 priority is getting people out of police stations.
Chicago, a city already bustling and densely populated, is now grappling with a housing crisis of unprecedented magnitude, spurred by a relentless influx of migrants seeking refuge in the Windy City.
Now, as hundreds of asylum seekers arrive in Chicago every single day, city leaders are grappling with how to handle the sudden influx of these new arrivals.
The core issue is stark. There is simply not enough housing to accommodate these newcomers. The challenge has become insurmountable, with exorbitant costs, overwhelming logistics, and the consequences clearly visible on the streets of Chicago for all to witness. Increasingly common. Migrants huddled in makeshift plastic tents, braving the harsh weather. Police stations, never meant to serve as residential facilities, are now packed, serving as makeshift shelters stretched beyond their capacity. Schools, too, are being repurposed into emergency housing, a controversial step that ignites debate over educational priorities and the future of learning in Chicago.
There are already over 2,000 migrants here that are unhoused, not including new arrivals.
Perhaps the most vivid symbol of this crisis are the tent encampments that have sprawled across sidewalks and parks. These are more than mere temporary shelters. They represent a city struggling to allocate its resources effectively. For many residents, these encampments are daily reminders of growing safety concerns and a declining quality of life. Amid these difficulties, one pressing question remains: how will Chicago address this severe housing shortage? With every conceivable space occupied and every shelter filled to capacity, the city is in desperate search of solutions. As Chicago faces this grim reality, it remains under the national spotlight. Will the Windy City find a way to navigate through this crisis? Only time will tell, but one thing is clear: the road ahead is fraught with obstacles. Government response.
I know folks may have questions about my style, but don't question my leadership.
In a charged atmosphere, the spotlight intensifies on those at the helm, Mayor Brandon Johnson and the Biden administration. As Chicago contends with a substantial influx of migrants, the efficacy of their governmental actions is under rigorous examination. With opinions as varied as the city's famous pizza toppings, Mayor Johnson finds himself at the heart of the controversy. Amidst mounting pressures, his strategies are scrutinized and hotly debated. Critics argue that his responses have been too slow and overly permissive, perhaps even misguided. Conversely, supporters see him as a leader attempting to navigate a tough situation with both compassion and practicality. Simultaneously, the Biden administration is caught in a broader national debate over immigration policies and their impact on cities like Chicago. The federal approach combines supportive measures and long-term policies, which sometimes seem detached from the city's immediate needs. Adding complexity to the political landscape is Texas Governor Abbott, whose decision to send migrants to sanctuary cities like Chicago has escalated tensions, compelling local and federal leaders to confront the repercussions head-on. Amid this intricate political saga, a critical question looms. How should this crisis be managed? Should the focus be on tightening borders, or should there be an increase in support? Each proposed solution stirs its own debate and controversy. As Chicago navigates these turbulent times, the government's actions are under meticulous observation. Will the implemented strategies bring the relief Chicago urgently needs, or will the city continue to be burdened by these challenges? The unfolding narrative keeps the government's next moves in the spotlight. As the world watches, one wonders if the Windy City can weather this storm, or if the pressures will prove too much. Time will disclose the outcomes, but it is evident that the decisions being made now will profoundly shape Chicago's future. National impact. As Chicago grapples with a significant influx of migrants, the effects ripple across the country, highlighting a national issue that affects cities from coast to coast. From the bustling streets of New York City to more remote locations throughout the United States, the impact of this crisis is profound and has sparked a national debate over policies, humanitarian concerns, and the foundational values of American society. New York City faces similar challenges to Chicago, with overwhelmed shelters and strained resources, showcasing a broader problem that is now a central part of the national dialogue. But what does this mean for the entire country? The current situation reveals a complex mix of issues: immigration policies, the roles of federal and local governments, and the capacity of cities to accommodate large numbers of newcomers. This crisis is a real-time test of America's infrastructure, values, and vision for the future. Critics warn that without a cohesive strategy and decisive action, this situation could severely impact urban centers across the nation. They express concerns that the strain on resources, public services, and community cohesion could pose risks not only to the directly affected cities, but also to the overall stability and prosperity of the United States. Further stirring the debate, former President Donald Trump has vocally criticized the handling of the crisis, viewing it as a failure of current immigration policies and leadership. Trump calls for tighter border controls and stricter immigration enforcement, framing the crisis as a crucial moment for the nation's security and identity. As the nation watches and waits, significant questions arise. How will the United States tackle this challenge? What lessons can be learned from cities like Chicago and New York? And crucially, how will these responses influence the future of a nation built on the principles of opportunity and sanctuary? Thus, the migrant crisis is not merely a series of local emergencies, but a moment of national introspection and determination, a pivotal episode in the continuing story of America, an evolving narrative observed in real time on streets and in homes across the nation. Fixing the crisis. In a city overwhelmed by an unprecedented crisis, a pressing question emerges. How can we resolve this? As Chicago faces a significant influx of migrants, finding effective solutions has become as challenging and valuable as discovering a rare gem. A widespread demand from both public avenues and governmental halls is for tighter border controls. This straightforward strategy aims to stop new arrivals, providing the city with the space needed to stabilize and focus on sustainable solutions without the continuous strain of an increasing population. However, it's debatable whether this approach alone is adequate. Financing is another critical factor. In times of crisis, the way funds are allocated and utilized is telling. Proposals to redirect financial resources to enhance housing and public services are under serious consideration. The goal is straightforward: to match the city's resources with the scale of its challenges, ensuring that both migrants and residents have access to basic necessities, such as shelter, safety, and stability. Looking forward, strategies are shifting towards integration education, and community support. Initiatives that include job creation and language instruction are being developed to transform this challenge into an opportunity, aiming to help migrants integrate and positively contribute to the community. This could lessen tensions and cultivate a more cohesive and resilient society. Governor Abbott's advocacy for stricter immigration controls adds another layer to the conversation. This national issue, playing out on the streets of Chicago, underscores the need for comprehensive immigration reform that addresses both the causes and the impacts of this wave of migration. As Chicago searches for answers, the path ahead is fraught with complexities. Effective responses will require cooperation, creativity, and a commitment to meet both immediate and long-term needs. The crisis has not only tested Chicago's resilience, but also ignited a renewed determination. This situation is more than just managing a surge in migrants. It presents an opportunity to redefine what community means in today's world. As Chicago looks to the future, the imperative is clear. The time for action is now.